In the United States today, $90 disappears quietly. It can be a single trip to the gas station, a few bags of groceries, one routine expense that barely feels special, and suddenly it's gone. No comfort, no sense of progress, just another reminder of how quickly money leaves your hands without leaving much behind. But somewhere else in the world, that same $90 stretches across an entire week. Not for luxury, not for indulgence, but for something many people haven't felt in a long time. A complete, livable rhythm of life. A small place to come home to simple meals that don't require constant calculation, electricity, water, and internet quietly taken care of, and days that no longer begin with financial anxiety. This is not about escaping responsibility. It's not about running away, cutting corners, or pretending life is easier than it really is. It's about something far more practical and far more human, living without constant financial pressure, living where money stops being the loudest voice in the room. Because when every decision is no longer measured by cost, something unexpected begins to happen. You breathe a little slower. You sleep a little deeper. And life, instead of feeling like a series of bills to survive, starts to feel manageable again. So if you're quietly wondering whether life can still feel gentler, not perfect, not rich, just calmer, then stay with me. Because in this video, we're looking at 5 countries where $90 a week still covers every basic need, and where enough turns out to be more powerful than we were ever taught to believe. 5. Georgia. Not many Americans wake up in the morning thinking about Georgia. Not the U.S. state, but a small country tucked between Europe and Asia, a place that rarely appears on anyone's retirement wish list. And perhaps that's exactly why Georgia ends up holding people longer than they originally planned. Mornings in Kutaisi, or the outer neighborhoods of Tbilisi, begin quietly. There are no blaring horns, no rushing crowds. A small cafe opens its doors early. A few older locals sit by the window, sipping dark coffee, speaking slowly enough that no one interrupts. No one pressures you to order more to leave or to make room. Time here isn't sold by the hour. It simply moves. With a budget of about $90 a week, life in Georgia isn't abundant, but it isn't stressful either. A modest apartment outside the city center rents for $180 to $250 a month, quiet enough for deep sleep, warm enough to get through the colder months. Local food is simple and seasonal, with meals costing $2 to $3 filling, without the need to calculate every bite. Electricity, water, and internet together run about $50 a month, and slowly you realize you're no longer opening utility bills with a sense of dread. One of the biggest reasons Americans feel at ease in Georgia is the visa situation. U.S. citizens can stay for up to 1 full year visa-free with no complicated renewals or constant paperwork. For people who have spent a lifetime living by deadlines, forms, and expiration dates. This simplicity brings a rare kind of stability. Not the stability of long-term contracts, but the stability of not being forced to decide your future right away. Healthcare in Georgia isn't flashy, but it's practical. Small private clinics are affordable, straightforward, and efficient. Basic medical needs are handled without creating financial strain. Daily life is generally calm, violent crime is low, and for those living in quiet residential areas, the sense of safety comes naturally, almost without conscious effort. Michael, 66. A former high school teacher from Oregon, originally planned to stay in Georgia for just a few months to see how it felt. A year later, he still hasn't left. As he put it, "For the first time in many years, I stopped checking my bank app every morning. Not because I have more money, but because I'm no longer afraid of how fast it disappears." Of course, Georgia isn't perfect. Winters can be long and cold, especially for those used to warmer climates. American-style entertainment is limited. There are no massive shopping malls, no endless convenience. But in exchange, days pass quietly and gently, without demanding that you spend money just to feel like you're living. Georgia isn't a place to start over with new ambitions, but for those who have already traveled far enough in life, it may be a place to pause not because options have run out, but because for once life no longer needs to be rushed. 4. Bolivia. Bolivia isn't a place that impresses at first glance. It isn't flashy, it isn't loud, and it doesn't overwhelm you the way many large South American cities do. But that sense of being just enough is exactly what makes life here feel easier to breathe. In cities like Cochabamba or Sucre, life moves at a pace you can keep up with without having to push yourself. Mornings begin with soft sunlight, cooler air, and streets that never feel crowded. The city is large enough to have hospitals, markets, and cafes, yet small enough that you don't disappear into the crowd. After a few weeks, vendors at the local market begin to recognize you. Familiar faces appear, and the feeling of being a stranger quietly fades away. With a weekly budget of around $90, life in Bolivia becomes surprisingly manageable. Rent for a simple apartment often sits near $200 a month, especially outside the city center. Local markets quickly become part of daily routine: fresh vegetables, seasonal fruit, low prices, and no pressure to bargain. Many people cook at home during the week and eat out occasionally at neighborhood eateries, where a warm, filling meal costs only a few dollars and feels unhurried. When it comes to visas, Bolivia offers a sense of ease that many retirees appreciate. Tourist stays are relatively long, and extensions are straightforward. There's no pressure to commit to permanent residency right away. For people used to rigid timelines and constant deadlines, that flexibility brings a sense of mental calm. You're allowed to live first and decide later. Private healthcare in Bolivia's larger cities is accessible and practical. Clinics are clean, affordable, and easy to navigate. Many foreigners choose to keep international health insurance for added peace of mind, especially for unexpected situations. But for routine care, medical visits rarely become a financial concern. Linda, 70, a widow from Arizona, moved to Cochabamba after her husband passed away. At first, she was simply looking for a quiet place to slow down. What kept her longer than expected wasn't the cost of living, but the way she was treated. As she put it, "I don't feel invisible here. People notice me in a kind way." Morning greetings, short conversations at the market, small moments that remind her she still belongs to a community. Life in Bolivia does ask for adjustment. The altitude takes time for the body to adapt. Imported goods are limited and familiar. American products aren't always easy to find. But in return, days pass more gently, spending feels lighter, and life begins to be measured by breath and routine rather than by bills. Bolivia doesn't try to impress. It simply offers a living space that feels sufficient, quiet enough, slow enough, and grounded enough for someone to feel truly seen. 3. Albania. Albania is not a place that overwhelms you. In towns like Berat or Shkodër, life feels very real, not staged to impress, not designed to please outsiders. Things unfold as they always have: windows opening to the morning light, neighbors greeting each other with a familiar nod, and a rhythm that moves steadily without needing to prove anything. Here, cities are small enough that you recognize the streets after a few weeks, familiar enough that the bakery on the corner remembers which loaf you prefer. People sit and talk longer than necessary, not because of appointments, but because no one is rushing. Life isn't measured by productivity, but by presence, being there, staying long enough, and feeling at ease. With a budget of about $90 a week, Albania offers a clear sense of stability. Rent for a modest apartment typically ranges from $200 to $280 a month, depending on location and distance from the center. Most food is fresh and seasonal, coming from small local farms. Vegetables, cheese, bread, olive oil, simple things but sufficient. As meals become simpler, impulsive spending quietly fades away, not because of restriction, but because there's little desire for more than what's needed. Visa rules are one of the reasons Americans often feel at ease here. One full year visa-free creates a rare feeling, the feeling of being allowed to stay. There's no need for constant renewals, no pressure to leave too soon, and no push toward long-term decisions before you've had time to settle into daily life. For many older adults, this sense of time security matters more than anything else. Safety and community are deeply connected in everyday Albanian life. Older people are treated with natural respect without ceremony. Neighbors look out for one another not in an intrusive way, but through quiet attention. If you don't step outside for a few days, someone will check in. If you need help, it often arrives before you ask. Belonging doesn't come from paperwork here, but from small human gestures. Thomas, 72, a former carpenter from Ohio, has been living in Shkodër for over 2 years. He spent his life working with his hands and never felt the need to talk much about himself. He smiles when he says, "No one here asks what I do. They ask if I've eaten." For him, that question is enough to feel that his worth no longer needs to be explained through a job title or income. Life in Albania does require acceptance. Specialized medical care is more centralized in larger cities, and infrastructure varies from one area to another. But for many, these realities don't outweigh the feeling of living at a slower pace, being seen, and being treated with quiet dignity. Albania doesn't try to become a dream destination. It simply offers a living space that feels real, where people matter more than schedules, and a shared meal can carry more meaning than convenience. 2. Bangladesh. Bangladesh is not a place people come to for convenience. In Sylhet or the quieter suburban areas, life feels simple and deeply human. Nothing is polished or staged. The streets are busy, sounds are always present. But beneath that surface is a steady, familiar rhythm, where people still make time for one another in very natural ways. Mornings begin early. Small tea stalls open while the air is still soft. A few people sit and talk without rushing. Children head to school, adults move toward the markets, and daily life repeats itself in patterns that feel grounded. In carefully chosen outer neighborhoods, the pace slows, the pressure eases, and many foreigners find a space that feels calm enough to settle into gradually. With a budget of around $90 a week, living costs in Bangladesh become very light if you eat and live the local way. Rent for a simple apartment usually falls between $150 and $220 a month, especially outside central areas. Food is where things feel easiest. Local meals are extremely inexpensive, always warm and always filling. When you eat like locals do, money stops being something you think about at every meal. Bangladesh works best for those who want to try living somewhere before making long-term decisions. Tourist visas can be extended. The process is fairly clear, and there's little pressure to commit to staying permanently. For many older adults, that flexibility brings psychological comfort, the freedom to stay long enough to feel the place without heavy obligations attached. Healthcare, particularly private clinics, is affordable and accessible for basic needs. Many foreigners choose quieter residential areas to reduce daily stress and make life easier. For more serious situations, people often keep international health insurance for peace of mind. Robert, 69, a former factory worker from the American Midwest, moved near Sylhet after retiring. He wasn't looking for a dramatic change in life. He simply wanted a place where money no longer weighed on him each morning. As he put it, "Here I don't feel poor. I feel sufficient." For him, that sense of sufficiency matters more than any number in a bank account. Life in Bangladesh does require careful choices. The population is dense, and daily life can feel overwhelming if you settle in the wrong area. But for those willing to observe, adjust, and slow down, Bangladesh offers a very different experience, one where spending feels lighter, people feel closer, and the value of life is measured less by what you own and more by the feeling of having enough each day. 1. Laos. There are places in the world that don't need to slow you down. They are already slow. And if you arrive carrying a hurried rhythm, they won't chase after you, they simply wait until you adjust. Luang Prabang is one of those places. Mornings in Luang Prabang begin with the faint sound of temple bells' light mist drifting through narrow streets and the Mekong River flowing steadily as if urgency never existed. There's no sense of needing to be anywhere on time. No one pushes you to decide quickly. Life here moves so slowly that at first it can feel unfamiliar and then unexpectedly relieving. With a budget of about $90 a week, life in Luang Prabang stays comfortably simple. Rent for a small apartment or house typically ranges between $200 and $250 a month, often in quiet, tree-lined neighborhoods. Daily meals are uncomplicated, clean and easy on the body. Rice, vegetables, fish, warm soups, nothing elaborate, nothing excessive. As food becomes simpler, the body begins to follow the same gentle rhythm. When it comes to visas, Laos doesn't offer clear long-term promises, but it provides a different kind of freedom. Step-by-step extensions allow people to stay long enough to feel the place without being pushed into early commitments. For those who have spent years living under long-range plans and rigid timelines, this flexibility creates room to breathe. Healthcare in Laos meets basic needs. Clinics are small, procedures are straightforward, and costs are manageable. For more complex situations, many people keep international insurance. But what truly keeps people in Luang Prabang isn't medical care, it's the mental atmosphere. The quiet, the Buddhist calm, and the gentle way people treat one another create a sense of balance that's difficult to describe and easy to feel. David, 73, a former long-haul truck driver from Texas, spent most of his life governed by schedules, clocks, and miles to be covered. When he arrived in Luang Prabang, he had no plan to stay long. A few months later, he said something simple. "This is the first place where my days stopped rushing me." For him, the change had little to do with money and everything to do with pace. Life in Laos does require acceptance. Infrastructure is limited, conveniences are few, and it's not a place for those who need everything to be instantly available at a high standard. But for people who have already traveled far enough in life, Luang Prabang offers something rare. The feeling that a day doesn't need to hurry past you, and that slowing down doesn't mean being left behind. Looking back at all the places we've just visited, one thing becomes very clear. Living cheaply does not mean living with less. In these countries, $90 a week doesn't buy luxury, but it does buy something many people have lost along the way: peace in ordinary days. There's no waking up with money chasing you, no dividing life into overdue bills, just slower mornings, more satisfying meals, and days that pass without needing to rush. At a certain point in life, the question stops being how much more you can earn. It becomes how many days you have left to live more gently. These places don't promise a perfect life. They quietly offer another option, where enough is no longer a sign of lack, but a quiet and lasting kind of wealth. If these stories made you sit a little longer, if you found yourself thinking after the video ended, then perhaps somewhere inside you, you're also looking for a slower rhythm of life. A place where you don't have to prove anything, don't have to keep up, and can simply live at your own pace. And if you'd like to keep hearing stories like these about places where people live with less pressure, a slower pace, and real dignity, please like this video to support the channel and subscribe so you don't miss the journeys ahead. We'll return to more places like this, places that aren't loud or flashy, but quiet enough to let you slow your breath.